Welcome back, everyone, to Section 4 of our ASC 326 Explainer on Credit Losses. If you are with us for Section 3, you'll remember we went through the foundational 7-step CCL framework and really dug into that crucial process of pooling. Okay, so now that we've successfully grouped our assets, it's time to actually open up the analyst's toolbox. Today, we're going to calculate the actual expected losses using these 6 specific estimation methods permitted under the standard. Let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for the session. We'll be looking at choosing the right method, followed by the loss rate method, vintage and roll rate, the PD/LGD approach, DCF and WARM, and finally a quick summary and our next steps.
All right, Section 1, choosing the right method and building your CECL toolbox.
You know, one of the biggest misconceptions out there about ASC 326 is that it forces this rigid, single mathematical formula onto every single asset you have. That is completely false. Instead, it gives you a highly flexible toolbox. So how do you actually choose? Well, the tool you pick depends entirely on the specific type of asset, the quality of data you have on hand, and how that portfolio behaves over time. But listen, here is the absolute non-negotiable rule. Every single method you use must incorporate historical loss experience, current economic conditions, and reasonable, supportable, forward-looking adjustments. You literally can't skip any of those 3. Moving on to Section 2, the loss rate method, the absolute workhorse for trade receivables.
Let's pull out our very first tool. The loss rate method is widely considered the workhorse of CCL, especially when you're dealing with short-term trade receivables. It runs on a super straightforward 5-step process. First up, run your aging report. Second, you look backward and gather 3 to 5 years of historical write-off data, segmented by those aging buckets. Third, calculate your historical loss rates. Fourth, and this is where the new standard really kicks in, you adjust those historical rates for current and forward-looking factors. Finally, step 5, you just multiply that newly adjusted rate by your current balance, and boom, you've got your required allowance.
To put that into perspective, just look at how these 5 steps play out in practice. Older, aging buckets naturally correlate to higher default probabilities, right? The historical rate jumps from a mere 1% in the current bucket all the way up to 25% for balances over 120 days past due. Once we layer on our Q factor adjustments, we get an adjusted rate, bringing our total required allowance for this $400,000 balance to exactly $15,800.
Next up, Section 3, vintage and roll rate methods. This is all about tracking cohorts and delinquency. These next 2 tools are completely focused on tracking how asset behavior changes over time. Method 2 is vintage analysis. I always say, think of this like tracking graduating high school classes. You group your financial assets strictly by their year of origination, and you track how credit losses develop over time for each specific year group. This lets you clearly see if your newer originations are performing better or worse than your older cohorts. It's an absolutely ideal method for things like term loans and amortizing credit facilities.
Now let's pivot to Method 3, roll rate, which is sometimes called migration analysis. While vintage tracks origination years, roll rate analysis tracks how assets migrate through different delinquency stages. It measures the probability that an asset will roll from one status to a worse one, say from 30 days late to 60 days late, and ultimately all the way to a total write-off. This is the perfect tool for high-volume consumer loans and credit cards because those portfolios have incredibly observable delinquency progressions. But there is a massive catch here. It relies heavily on you having flawless, high-volume historical data. If your data is spotty, this tool is going to fail you for sure. Let's look at a transition matrix to see how this migration works. Take a look at the 60 days past due row. Historically, 20% of these accounts cure and go back to current. Another 20% stay at 60 days, and a massive 60% roll into the 90-plus days past due category. You're basically drawing a map of the historical pathways an asset can take. So the takeaway here is that you are building a mathematical chain of probabilities based on where the asset sits right now. By multiplying those transition probabilities across all the different stages, you can pinpoint the exact likelihood of an eventual loss, right from the starting status. Moving right along to Section 4, the PD/LGD approach. This is where we get maximum granularity and control. If you need tight granular control, this is the tool you pull from the box. With Method 4, we estimate 3 distinct components totally separately. Component 1 is PD, or probability of default. In plain English, this is just the statistical likelihood that your borrower is going to fail to pay over the remaining life of the asset. We estimate this using things like internal risk ratings, credit scores, historical default rates, and of course, macroeconomic adjustments.
Component 2 is LGD, or loss given default. Now, the crucial distinction to remember is this. PD is if they default. LGD is how much it hurts when they actually do. It represents the percentage of the exposure you permanently lose if a default happens. This metric heavily relies on your historical recovery rates, how senior your claim is, and the actual value of the collateral backing the loan.
The final piece of the puzzle is EAD, exposure at default. Now, this isn't just your balance today. Well, actually, scratch that. It includes your current balance, but it's really the outstanding balance at the exact moment the default happens. The absolute danger zone here, and where so many companies trip up, is forgetting to include estimated unfunded commitment drawdowns and accrued interest. Think about it. If a borrower is going under, they are very likely maxing out their credit lines right before they fail. You absolutely have to account for that.
Once you have those 3 granular estimates, the math is delightfully simple. Multiply your probability of default by your loss given default, and then multiply that by your exposure at default. There's your expected credit loss. Because it allows for such tight risk-rated control, this approach has really become the industry standard for commercial loan portfolios with rated borrowers.
All right, Section 5, the DCF and WARM methods, a tale of precision versus simplicity. Let's look at our last 2 tools side by side because they sit on literal opposite ends of the spectrum. The DCF method demands incredible precision and massive amounts of data to compare amortized cost to the present value of expected future cash flows. On the flip side, WARM prioritizes sheer simplicity. It just takes a basic annual loss rate and scales it by the portfolio's weighted average remaining life. Let's examine DCF first. Honestly, this is the heavy machinery of our toolbox. You start with the contractual payment schedule, you adjust each period's cash flows for the probability of default, and then you discount the result. So your expected credit loss equals your amortized cost minus the present value of those expected future cash flows. Because you have to track exact cash flow timing, it's incredibly data intensive. You really want to reserve this tool for individually significant loans, restructured receivables, or collateral-dependent assets where you truly need that level of microscopic precision. Conversely, Method 6, the WARM method, uses this beautifully simple formula. Your expected credit loss simply equals your outstanding balance, multiplied by your adjusted annual loss rate, multiplied by the weighted average remaining maturity of the portfolio in years. You're basically just scaling your annual loss rate by how long the assets are actually going to be around.
For instance, imagine you have a $1 million outstanding balance. If your adjusted historical annual loss rate is 2.5%, and the weighted average remaining maturity of that portfolio is 1.8 years, the math is totally linear. 1 million times 2.5% times 1.8 years gives you exactly a $45,000 required allowance. Quick, easy, and very fast.
But listen closely, because the WARM method has a trap, a major danger zone, the maturity assumption. While it's fully permitted under CECL, it requires incredibly careful documentation. Because the math is strictly linear, your maturity assumption is the most critical variable in the whole equation. If you estimate a remaining maturity of 2.5 years instead of 1.8 years, your required allowance is going to skyrocket proportionally, even if the actual credit quality of your borrowers hasn't changed one bit. That's why the basis for your maturity assumption must be rigorously reviewed and documented every single reporting period. Finally, Section 6, Summary and Next Steps, completing the quantitative base. Okay, we've reviewed all 6 methods. By pulling the right tools, whether that's loss rate, roll rate, or PD/LGD, we've built a solid, mathematically sound foundation. But our work isn't fully done yet. The numbers we generated today are just the quantitative base. As we prepare for our next explainer in Section 5, I want you to look at your own company's portfolios. Ask yourself right now, which of these 6 methods are you actually equipped to handle from a data perspective? Get really comfortable with your choices, because next time we're going to layer qualitative adjustments and economic forecasts directly on top of these raw numbers. If your base is wrong, your entire forecast will collapse. So what's your base going to be? Think about it, and I'll see you in Section 5.